I normally delete out the title.
How do you do? Oh, I get what Dr.
There we go.
Madam Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome our visitors and those who are watching this evening to our weekly budget meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Best, roll call, please.
Mayor Bennett,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pardon,
Here.
Councilor Randolph,
Here.
Councilor Holloway,
Here.
Councilor Gore,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Pelham.
Here.
Mayor Bennett, you have 7 present, 0 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to, prior to me handing this over to Mr. Altman this evening, I'd like to ask council if we would allow the presenters to complete their presentation prior to us asking questions or, okay? Thank you. Mr. Altman.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, members of council. So without delay, I will turn the floor over to Dr. Hackney. I know they have a presentation at the high school, I think National Honor Society this evening. So I'll go ahead and let her discuss school's budget proposal with council on the understanding that they're pressed for time.
Thank you, Mr. Altman. Good evening, council members, Mayor Bennett. We are happy to be here. Janelle English is here with me, our finance director. We're going to try to run through this as quickly as possible, and we apologize, but we appreciate the grace. I do have to speak at a ceremony at 7 o'clock, so we'll get right at it. Janelle's going to share her screen and walk us through the essence of our budget request, and then we are here for questions for any of you.
Okay, good evening. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and City Council, you may have seen this before. I believe Mr. Altman may have shared this with you, but we will go through this. This is a fiscal year 22 school budget requests. We are requesting to give our employees a 5% raise, which the state is funding most of for the SOQ positions. That amounts to $1,985,926. We would also like to implement the last phase of our class and comp study. This is the last group of employees to get this. We have delayed it a year, so we would like to finish this class and comp implementation. The amount is $600,236. We would also like to change our special ed compliance officers to be 230-day employees. They're currently 210-day employees. They have an increased workload. That amounts to about $30,000. We would like to add 2 special education teachers. That amounts to $120,000. And we also have a health insurance increase this year in the amount of $456,940. So we have total additional requests of $3,193,102. Now, if we go back to what the city says is our level of funding, less the Office on Youth, is $12,265,194. And you allowed us in fiscal year 21 to use our fiscal year 17 surplus for fiscal year 21 budget. That was $1,136,069 for a total city funding in FY21 of $13,401,263. If you add to that the additional requests that we just went over above, the $3,193,102, and subtract the state funds that we're receiving, which is $1,706,901, we have a total request from the city, not including Office on Youth, in the amount of $14,887,464. And if you remember, we had a way to hopefully come up with these extra funds. So we need to find the fiscal year 17 surplus, because that's obviously gone. So the $1.1 million plus our additional requests of $3.1 million. We subtract out our extra state funds of $1.7 million. So that means we need to find $2,622,270. And I've been told that the estimate of the fiscal year 18 surplus is $1.8 million. And then we are also estimating that we can save in fiscal year 21, we can save $822,270 to make up the balance to get the additional $2.6 million that we need. And that is basically, that's it.
Thank you, Janelle.
Yes, ma'am.
Counselors, before we knew that we had the conflict with the high school, we didn't want to take too much time. So we tried to get it to the very essence of bottom line, and now we're available for your questions.
I don't know if you can see who's got hands up. Maybe the mayor's going to have to do that.
Yes, Counselor Randolph.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Dr. Hackney, I have several questions, and I'll try and keep them real brief. But I know that we have all been told that the school budget has a $1.8 million surplus that you all are looking at using. According to my figures, and I've looked at everything, the class and comp that you're looking at for this year at $630,000, are those staffers entitled to the 5% increase through the state?
It depends. I'll let Janelle share that with you. You know, the state only provides raises for the positions that they fund from the standards of quality. So there are positions in the organization, as well as the group that has yet to have their class and comp, their salary classifications reconciled, that are in both of those groups. Some are SOQ positions, meaning they are funded by the state, so they're eligible. The others, if we give them a raise, which we have done historically as well, we have to use local funds to do that. And Janelle can tell you more specifically, Councilor Randolph, how that breaks down. Janelle, you want to share that, please?
Yes, ma'am. There's approximately, of the positions that we have in this last phase of the class and comp study, there's about 40% of them are SOQ positions, the standard of quality positions that the state gives us that will give us the 5% for. So that equates to only about $127,000 of the 5% that could be used towards that class and comp from the state.
Okay, so 40% of them only out of the $822,000 that you're looking for, or excuse me, the $630,000 you're looking for, only 127 is 40%.
It's not, well, it's not exactly of the 600,000. I had to go through and look at the different positions. So it equates to approximately $127,000.
Okay, so why haven't you all looked at doing 127,000 less for your class and comp if they're already getting a 5% raise? I understand you'd like to do the class and comp. We'd like to do our class and comp too, but sometimes we have to look at different capacities of what's feasible and what can be pushed off. And I would think that if they're already getting a 5% raise, you know, we could push them off for another year before their class and comp. I'm looking at ways to physically manage and try and still meet what we can do. You all did not put in this budget at all this year for the $300,000 that we're looking at from Munis either. We've talked briefly about how we can get the school systems to be on the same accounting systems. And I understand in the 2018 audit, which should be coming up, which we have not seen, by the way. There are aspects that are going to be write-ups for the schools and for some other city departments. So I think that it is important for us to, as a team, to look at how we're going to fund that $300,000 to get you all on Munis so that it is something that can be less labor intensive for all of us to be able to look at the budget. The 1.8 million, quite frankly, what I was looking at was doing away with all of the class and comp for this year and pushing it to another year. That would give you all approximately 886,965 or somewhere in that neighborhood of money that you would need to find for those additional requests that you just went through. And in the work session earlier this year, you had said that you had a savings of about 800,000, which would almost offset the costs if we got rid of class and comp for the new requests that you've gone through. That would leave us with still looking for a way to fund that 1.1 million. And as you said yourself, we've got a savings of 1.8. Do we know how much you all potentially saved in 2019? Have you all
I do-
had any indication of that?
No, ma'am, not yet.
Okay, because it seems to me that in 17, you all saved 1.1 million. In 2018, 17, 1.1 million, 18, 1.8 million. And each year there seems to be, and this year, from what you've told us so far, the savings was 886, approximately 886,000. We're getting close to $1 million each year that is saved. And my concern is that the budget requests are looking at $1 million additions to your budget, but yet we turn around and save that amount. So I am interested in looking at more of your budget and where we could possibly come closer to what is actually needed. Because if you've got 1.13 that you're still in need of, but you've got a savings of 1.8 from 18, what are you all planning on doing with that extra $500,000? Is that something you just want to have to put into the kitty and in case you need it? I mean, in my calculations, I'm not getting the same amounts that you need. Of course, like I said, I'm striking out the class and comp, letting the people that get the 5% take it, and then coming to us with a more finite figure. And if that's needed through the 1.8, then we could possibly look at it. But I'd like to be able to use part of that 1.8 for the 300,000 for Munis and have you all be on the same accounting system that all of council, I think, feels is necessary. That's my thoughts. And so we can either come closer together on this before we vote in the next coming week. But I'd like to see it come a little closer to what was last year's budget versus the 1.1 addition. And now we've got another 1.3 addition in a year that, you know, you all have already said earlier that you've saved almost $1 million. Just seems to me that we are forming a pattern of saving about $1 million each year. So why are we asking for it each year if we can save that much? Maybe some offline explanations or help for me would be much needed before next week. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. That's all I've got to say.
Mayor Bennett, would you like us to answer to those or?
Yes, if you would like.
Okay, I'm going to try to be really quick.
you.
The cost of the munis, that has never been discussed formally. We would have certainly worked that in if there was an investment in doing that in this budget cycle. This is the first we've heard of that. So if we need to go back and try to figure out how to find $300,000, we'll figure that out, or we'll try to figure that out. That's the easy one. The savings, I have to tell you, this pattern to which you refer has been going on for 20 plus years. It was not only an agreement between the two boards, it was encouraged and it was rewarded with that savings with the building bus replacement fund. That saved the city council many, many years of no one having to, from the schools having to come and say, we need a new roof, we need a new chiller, we need, $500,000 in new school buses. That's kind of a hard habit to break. And, we have been good stewards of the city's money, and we have chosen consciously not to spend down our budget to a zero balance budget, which quite frankly, most school districts do, because we had this good faith agreement to roll it over. So, we can do that. We can do one of two things. We can start spending the money that you might perceive as being discretionary, or we can do a better job trying to predict. The problem is we've already done that. We do that every single year. We look at our spending, we look at our projections, we look at our actuals, and the areas where there is, fluctuation are areas that we can't predict. Like, for example, special education contracted services. That is different based on the unique needs of a child with disabilities. It's a federally protected service, and we have to pay for it, but we oftentimes don't know what that's going to look like. We also can't anticipate the students with special needs that come into our district and are immediately eligible, but weren't even considered in the budget process. So that's one area that some years we overspend, quite honestly, and some years we have a considerable savings. To answer your question about 19, there was one area that we had significant savings, but that was unique to that year, and that was substitutes. We didn't need substitutes when kids were learning virtually. And remotely. So, that's a big ticket item that normally we exceed, or at least come close to, over $1 million. So, you're welcome to look at our budget more closely, and we're happy to do that with you. Janelle, you can share any other ideas that you have, but my response is twofold. One, we have consistently been in a conservation mode so that we could create this savings account in our building bus fund to be able to cover things we couldn't anticipate and have for 20 plus years. And where we look deeper at those areas that sometimes we have a significant surplus at the end of the year, they're not areas that we can necessarily anticipate. We can look at projections, but so many times, and certainly in the last 2 years with COVID, so many times the connection is it's fluid. It changes every year. 1 year we'll overspend special ed contracting. One year we will completely underspend that. But you're welcome to look closely. That's what we do. And if we thought we could find the money, we would put it on here. But the munis, I can't speak to. We've not had conversations other than just conceptually, would you all be open to it? And absolutely, we're open to it. We think it makes perfect sense, and are certainly willing to look at how to pay for that. But I did not understand that was your expectation.
And it's not necessarily, and I'll just add this footnote. This council has been very adamant in its concept of purchasing, and we are holding the city management to a standard that we don't seem to be holding schools to. And I would think with the amount of money that we have to spend, and it's important to spend on our education, that we should be consistent in our expectations of what the schools do and what they spend it on, that comes from the city versus just holding the city accountable. So I bring all this up, not because I think you're willy-nilly spending, but that to continue to have a savings of $1 million a year or approximately, kudos to you, but that doesn't run parallel to the expectations of what we've put on our own city staffers. And so I bring it up for council to review themselves in their expectations, as well as, you know, letting you all have a heads up on some of the things that we're talking about. So don't take offense to what I said. I understand from previous years that this was a gentleman's agreement, that you all wouldn't have to approach council for capital projects. But since we know very little about the capital projects that you've done, you know, I think that we'd want to be consistent. And so it's not just for you, I'm saying that, but for the council itself and how we manage fund balances and spending. So please understand that that comes from a couple of different places. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Bennett, I would like to respond if I can to the class and comp. I just want to make sure that the city council understands that these very employees voluntarily last year offered up their raises that they deserved last year to get their classifications to the regional average of 4 years ago. So we're already behind. They waited a year because they knew it was going to be a difficult budget year. And every other employee in the organization has received the reconciliation of moving their classification to the regional average. I cannot, and I won't, not advocate for that. If you don't fund it, I understand. I do understand, but I have to advocate for that. That is only fair. And they have waited over a year now voluntarily, when it's not fair. They deserve to be at the regional average in their classification, just like everyone else. And this is a process that we started 5 years ago. So I can't personally recommend, and this is, the board has approved this budget as you're seeing it, the school board. You know, we feel very strongly that those employees deserve this, it's not, doesn't relate to the 5% raise. It's apples to oranges, and we're not giving them the 5% raise. We give them whichever is higher. So I just feel compelled to say that on behalf of my employees who've waited for a long time to get where the rest of our employees already are.
Thank you, Dr. Hackney. Thank you for being here this evening. And I know you have probably less than 6 minutes to get to the National Honor Society induction meeting tonight.
Yes, ma'am. And I apologize for that. If you need me to come back another time, I will. But I feel like I have to be there for our students.
Well, I thank you for everything you do for our students. Me speaking as a mom with my children going through the Hopewell school system, they just thrive. And I thank you all, the schools, for everything that they do and for encouraging our children, you know, in all levels. So thank you.
Mayor Bennett, I appreciate that. And I want the council to know that I think we have shown you over the last 6 years that your money is being spent well, and you are seeing direct outcomes in teaching and learning, which is where you should see those outcomes. You're seeing it in staff retention. You're seeing it in the culture of the organization. And I'm very proud of all we've accomplished, and we could not have done that without your support. So thank you. I hope that you feel like your monies have been spent well. So thank you.
Thank
Take
you so
care.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I thought there was one more thing on the agenda.
What was it? Maybe I stopped sharing.
So we have just where we left off with our budget discussion with council with regard to the 2.5% COLA was a discussion that council wanted to have about positions. So the last sheet, I think, of your packet had the options that we put up at our last work session. So if, and I think we talked about the rental inspector, the munis position, the animal custodians at that point, at that meeting, and then we have the other position that is a enterprise fund position at water renewal. So staff just needs from council's guidance which positions you would look to implement in the budget, so we can prepare the budget resolution in accordance with that.
Was that all of your presentation? I do have Counselor Gore's hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was gonna go back to the previous topic. I was trying to, Dr. Hackney had to leave. There's only time for one person to speak with the limited time that she was here. So did you know if we got the answer as to the idea for the schools to use the 5% first and then go back and use the remainder? Because I didn't hear her discuss that unless I overlooked it.
I don't think they addressed it specifically. I think what I heard was.
No, I'm saying, do you know the answer? Because we asked for you to talk to her about that.
No, I don't know the answer to that question. What I was going to say is they talked about was the class and comp and the individuals that were involved in that. But I don't think they've actually come up with a calculation that says if we apply the 5% across the board, the raise that we're getting across the board, and so the example I'll give, and kind of the example that I gave in was, let's say I'm getting an 8% class and comp raise, but what would it look like if you use the 5% of the state increase? Then how much of that 3% is then local dollars? So how do we reduce that 600? And I don't have the answer to that from them yet. No, ma'am.
But you've spoken to them about it specifically?
Yes.
And did you ask her specifically about the last few years to figure out where the money savings were coming from?
So when I sent Dr. Hackney a list of items that that I had gotten questions on and comments about, I indicated that class and comp was the big item, a discussion of that raise, class and comp, and how that would work, and then also what areas had the schools saved money in consistently saved money in over the past few years.
And you didn't get an answer yet?
I haven't gotten an answer yet, no, ma'am. And I know initially tonight, the ceremony was later or earlier, and then she was going to come on later, but then somehow it got moved later, so she had to come on earlier. So we had to flip-flop the order this evening for her to be at the high school. But initially we thought the ceremony was going to start at 6:30 and she would be done by 7:30, and then she could come on after I finished the discussion of the city budget. So, but I'll see if I'll follow up tomorrow, and we can get that information, or if they've got any of that information, because I know we talked about that 5% playing into the class and comp during the first budget work session we had with them.
Well, did you hear, Councilor Gore? Did you hear?
So 1 second, please. So you said you're going to follow up with her via email regarding that. To get that information?
Yeah,
specifically.
I was going to call her tomorrow. I was going to call her tomorrow and talk to her.
Can we just go back to the first year that we started giving them the money? I think if they have that option, I think we started in 17. Is that like the first year that we did the bus replacement fund? Wasn't it 17 money?
I'm trying to remember. I think
1.1.
it was 16 money. And it wasn't, it was in,
It was the 5 million, but the one after that, she should be able to use.
right.
So, because it was a 5 million all in one lump sum, but so I'm just pointing as a point of reference that next year she should be able to go do, because it should just be that it should be each one fiscal year after that, if that makes sense. I think you
Yeah.
understand what I'm trying to say.
So we used
Okay.
the 17 money with last year's budget, if I remember correctly. That's why they were talking about the 18 money with this year's budget.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Gore, did you not hear, were you online when I asked them the question of how many people in the class and comp would get the SOQ 5%?
I heard you, but that wasn't my question.
Okay, because they said 40%.
Right, but that, again, that still wasn't my question.
Vice Mayor Parton and then Counselor Pelham.
My question's on the City of Hopewell budget. So, I mean, Ms. Pelham, is yours on the schools or on the city?
Schools.
Schools, okay. I mean, you can go before me.
Oh, thank you, sir. What was the $127,000 you talked about? I thought that was a part of the savings if she applied the 5% to the comp study. That wasn't what she said?
She said that 40% of the people in the class and comp study were able to get 5% from the state.
I understand it, but I'm saying, what was her reference to?
It equated to $127,000.
And wouldn't that be taken away from the $600,000?
Well, they don't apparently feel that way. So the answer came back as to no, because I asked the same thing.
I think the numbers that were given to this evening were approximate. So out of 630,000, if you 40% of that is 127, she said it's approximate, but it's not a definite number.
But what did she make this statement so that if she had to, she would apply that to that for that purpose?
No.
So what I heard was the same statement from the first. They planned on giving the employees the higher of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't hear them say that the 5% would factor in to the class and comp, reducing the local contribution amount required.
And that's what I'm asking for him to verify, because she did not say or allude to that.
Yeah.
She did.
Okay, but
She
I know
said-
y'all uses the, I haven't finished, I'm sorry. The 16 to 17, maybe when we started this cycle of giving back, but like she said, they've been giving back in March as a witness to this, Mr. Altman, 20 years. So whatever was placed in that bus garage fund, whatever it was called, that money too was excess money. We just started doing it this way because we learned by our attorney that you can't just automatically leave the money there, and it has to be physically transferred back to the city. And
right.
Rated, I guess. So my point is, if she's gonna do a comparison of the savings, maybe it should be a 10-point cycle. 10-year cycle or whatever, because we have, I know, been doing it since I was on council anyway, which is close to 20 years. So I don't know how y'all feel about that. Do they need to go back that far? Or you just want to do it with the transfer of monies from the 16 or 17 budget? Just food for thought. You don't have to answer, but all right, thank you. Mr. Parton? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is just going over to the City of Hopewell fiscal year 22 budget. Mr. Allman had asked us about the staff positions, and I just wanted to state that I was fully in favor of adding that extra lab technician position down at the wastewater plant. That job would actually end up resulting in tens of thousands, if not over $100,000 worth of savings in overtime for the existing lab techs, and also for service contracts that we have to do out to keep up with DEQ and EPA reporting requirements. So I just want to say that I was fully supportive of that and think it would actually be a good help down there at the plant and end up saving us money for the city.
Put my hand up.
Councilor Randolph?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. City Manager, I'm not clear as to what the difference is. I'm in favor of the lab tech. I'm also in favor of the part-time to full-time of the for the animal control. But you mentioned a couple of other things that were not in last week's presentation of positions. And I know that you had suggested to us a couple of positions as well. What is the difference between the two that were listed and any other positions that we need to be talking about?
So one, the lab tech position is a enterprise fund position and doesn't have an impact or effect on the general operating budget. So it's not
Okay,
part of,
so that's an automatic that you're going to do. Is that correct?
well, provided council approves the position, yeah, that would be one we would
Okay.
do, but it doesn't have an effect on our general fund.
Okay, well, I'm in favor of that one. What about the full-time, the animal control
The conversion of the two part-time positions to a full-time position for
has
the animal
net zero?
shelter, that's about an increase of about $19,373 increase to make that a full-time position.
Okay,
And
I'm
the-
in favor of that as well.
And then the
Okay.
other positions that we've talked about, that I just want to see if they're where council is, because they were, you asked for the whole list of positions that were requested, was the additional rental inspector, which we talked about several times. That has a 56,000, just call it a $57,000 impact on the budget. And then the munis administrator position, which is about an $88,000 impact on the budget.
So I'm in
So-
favor personally of the rental inspection person because we can't revamp the rental inspection program per Ms. Griffith until we hire that person. That's what she told us last time.
Mhm.
And so I want that revamp to happen so that we can charge higher fees, become more stringent on that program, and to spread it out throughout the city and look at how we can change the dynamics of housing. Now, help me understand very quickly the munis person.
So the munis person is, we've talked about over time, and that as we continue to grow with our munis system, the need to have kind of I'll call it a in-house expert, if you
Yes.
will, to assist departments with issues that come up with munis.
Okay,
So that's kind of that's where that position and what that position would look like.
okay. And I think that's something that Counselor Gore has asked for
Mhm.
in the past. Is that correct, Counselor Gore?
Yeah, I asked for the real estate person. I had that on the budget, on the agenda several times last year. I asked for the munis person and then also someone for the public Wi-Fi. So those three asks,
Okay.
yes.
Well,
And I
then
asked for the
will-
munis person and the real estate person last budget cycle.
You-
Okay, well then I'm in favor of the munis person.
And just so I'm clear, when you say real estate, were you talking about the rental inspection?
Yes, I meant to say rental inspection, say real
Just
estate.
wanted to
Yeah,
be
last
clear.
budget cycle, I had advocated for the rental inspection person and a munis person, but the tone back then was to cut the budget. So I'm glad that this is back on the table for discussion.
I'm done, thank you.
Counselor Denton and then Counselor Pelham.
Yes, I just have one question. I'm looking at the information city manager gave us last time, and I see the 3 positions. That was option 3, and that included the rental inspectors, the IT administrator, and the 2 part-time going into 1 full-time. But where is the lab technician? I don't see that in this list.
So the lab tech position isn't in that grouping because that position doesn't have an effect on our general fund. It's in the enterprise fund down at water renewal. So it would not have an impact on how our general fund budget was adopted. So that's why it's not there.
Okay,
These
thank
are
you.
all positions that are general fund positions and would have an impact on our general fund because we talked about pulling some capital back, what we were moving from the general fund to capital, pulling some of that back to make
Right.
the raise. And that's why I focused on that. So that's why that position's not in there.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Mr.
You
Pelham.
talk about when you talk about the Munis look, one of my concerns would be with the Munis, a consultant, they have different Munis people who represent different parts of Munis. So how would it, is there such an animal as a Munis that does all the transactions like that each department would have to do, or because they have special areas within Munis, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Munis has, like, I call them teams of people that deal with
Yeah.
different modules that we have.
Mhm.
So the thought would be is if we could get someone in the beginning, kind of be a generalist to be able to help people, and then have that person trained over time in specific areas additionally, so you wouldn't have to always use Munis support or call in Munis to come down to do training, but we might be able to send our person to Munis training and that person comes back and then train the trainer kind of thought process.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
88,000 include benefits?
All those numbers are salary and benefits. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
You, Counselor Denton.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will just say that I'm for those positions. Thank you.
Are there any other? Mr. Altman, did you have anything to, any closing remarks?
Just to thank council for their continued support of staff with regard to the raise. Really do appreciate that. And I know that they do, given what's happening around us with the state raises. So really do appreciate council's willingness to give that consideration to our employees.
Thank you so much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Denton, seconded by Counselor Randolph. Roll call.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pelham,
Yeah,
Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pardon.
Yes.
Mayor Bennett, you have 7-0 to adjourn.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
night.
Thank
Thank you.
Good night.